Hi everyone, my name is Lily and you're listening to Humans of Authenticity, the CEO Special Edition. Our guest today is Tyler Eble, President at the Association Development Solutions in Chicago. Welcome to Humans of Authenticity, Tyler.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Look forward to the conversations. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners first?
Yeah, I'm Tyler Eble. As V had mentioned, I'm the president of Association Development Solutions. We're a fundraising consulting firm that focuses on the association community. Like a lot of people, I kind of fell into the association world and I've enjoyed every minute of it, getting to meet a lot of great people, discover a lot of industries and professions I didn't know existed. It's been an opportunity that's kept me on my toes for about 15 years now.
What drew you into the association sector in the beginning?
So it's a funny story. I didn't really apply for my job or anything like that. Shortly before I was getting ready to graduate college, I had run into what I then found out is the owner of this company. And I knew him from my personal life. I used to hang out with his stepson, and he was asking me kind of questions. It was January before I was supposed to graduate in May. He knew, generally speaking, my age, and he was kind of like, what do you plan on doing? You're getting ready to graduate. Do you have a job lined up, et cetera? And I just kind of went off on a little bit of a rant about what my interests were professionally. I didn't have a job at the time lined up, but I did have an internship at a larger privately held manufacturing company. I was kind of a marketing intern or a marketing assistant. And I did that all 4 years of college. And it was really awesome experience to get at that age. My father was an executive at the company, so I didn't really have a choice. I was getting ready to leave for school as a freshman, and my dad puts this employee handbook on the kitchen table and says, "You've got an internship." I was like, "I do." Okay. So I had the luxury, the privilege of doing that both kind of remote and in the offices during the summers. And then in school, when I was a junior, I was accepted into this program. It was a junior consulting program through the College of Business at Northern Illinois University. And that really exposed me to kind of the world of consulting, so to speak. And I loved it. My first project with that program was for a group of dermatologists in Illinois that wanted to band together and create kind of this institute of dermatology in the state of Illinois. And I got paired up with 5 other students with different backgrounds in the school, and we got to go through this whole marketing, branding kind of planning project. And then when I was a senior, the following year, I applied to be what they call a coach or a manager for that. So I actually got accepted to then lead a team on a project for Sears Holdings Corporation at the time. And they had gone to the school and they wanted a group of students to kind of explore how to better engage younger audiences to get them into their stores. They were really wrestling with that. As you fast forward 15 years, we see why. And it was interesting because I got to then lead a team, not really be as much of the hands-on doer, but someone to guide other students that were in my position like I was just, a few months before. So to kind of go back to the conversation I had with the owner of our company, I was explaining to him all of this experience. And I said, listen, I love the bigger company I work for, but I feel like I'm kind of just a kid in a cubicle, right? Showing up every day, clocking in, clocking out, putting in my time. It was okay. I learned a lot about professionalism, how to communicate, what life is like after school. And I value that deeply, but it wasn't an environment that I felt like I wanted to spend my forever years after school. And then I told him about my experience in the junior consulting world. And I just said, listen, it was an opportunity for me to get outside of the textbook to really put my education to practice in real time while I was still gaining knowledge from school. But I like this idea of problem solving. We had this business problem that was brought to us. The client in those moments entrusted us to explore it and try to solve it for them. And I like the idea that there wasn't a right or wrong answer. And it really allowed me to, I think, expand my horizons pre-graduation, which was really important to me. And I kind of explained that the impact I was making was very direct. I got to wear a lot of hats doing it. It really did make every day exciting working on that. And I was finding myself investing a lot more time in the junior consulting work than in my classwork because that was what was fun to me. And I'd kind of found a bit of my professional passion doing that. And lo and behold, I didn't know he owned a boutique consulting firm. And he had made a comment, it's really interesting. I think you should call me. I might have a job for you. And I thought in my head, okay, he's just being nice. This is my friend's father. So of course he's going to say that. So I didn't follow up. I didn't do anything with it. And his wife actually texted me a couple weeks later and said, hey, you should get back in touch. There's a marketing opportunity. And he knew I was a marketing major. So he had presented this idea that I could come into the firm and lead the marketing efforts of the company.
Nice.
I had no idea what associations were. I had no idea what fundraising as a profession was. So it was just a lot of unknown. Growing up, I was always kind of taught, like I think a lot of people are on a traditional path, go work for some large blue chip company, right? Go work for a GE of the world. They're big, it's safe, right? That's kind of the move after school. So I looked at this as an opportunity that was kind of going against the grain. So I kind of wrestled with the idea of it, and I didn't know what I didn't know, but ultimately like the idea that I could continue doing similar kinds of work like I did when I was a junior consultant and go help kind of solve problems. It was really intimidating, but also at the same time, it was an intriguing opportunity. So I did it. And then I was, as they say, drinking from the fire hydrant very quickly about all that exists within the association kind of world. And I was drawn in right away.
That's really cool. There are a couple of things I like to revisit after hearing your story. It sounds like you were in positions to lead a team very early in your journey, and you mentioned feeling intimidating. Unpack that feeling of intimidating for me. Can you?
So intimidating from a couple standpoints. One is doing something that you've basically been taught not to do, right? Taking that risk and pursuing a career path that doesn't line up with the traditional path that you're expected to take. And then also getting into a world of work that is completely foreign, right? The concept of it was almost completely foreign in the sense of associations and fundraising. So I was really taking the owner's word at face value that this was a different kind of opportunity that would allow me to grow and advance in my career more quickly, likely, than I would be able to in other pathways. And he was absolutely right. In terms of the leadership side of things, leadership's interesting to me, right? So I've always been put in leadership positions. Rarely have I raised my hand for them, so to speak. And I think about this again, it goes all the way back to like elementary school. My parents would always come back from parent teacher conferences and say, well, your teacher says you're just a natural leader. And as a kid, I was like, what does that even mean? I don't know what that means. I'm just a kid who gets yelled at for talking too much in class, right? And apparently that meant I'm a good leader. But that was a very consistent trend throughout my younger years. And I was always kind of the student that if I was out sick for a day and I got back, the teacher's always like, it was very quiet without you. You have a noticeable presence in the classroom. And again, I always looked at that as like, oh man, they think I'm a troublemaker. I'm the class clown. But I guess other people had noticed that maybe I have an ability to get people to kind of follow my lead and do those things. I'm not afraid to kind of step up and do. And that kind of translated then professionally. So intimidating in terms of leadership, it's mostly because I don't view myself as a leader like that. It's not something I think about. It's actually kind of abnormal to me to be someone who's out in front doing that, but it comes naturally. So it's just an interesting dichotomy. I get asked the question all the time, like, what does leadership mean to me? And I'm like, I'm still trying to figure that out to a certain extent. I've been with the company now going into my 14th year and serving as the president now for almost 5. It's still odd to me to consider myself like that. I'm working with people who I've known for a long time. So when I think about how that translates into how I act as a leader, I try to set a good example. I try to do what's right, but I'm still struggling with that idea of being a leader. And despite so much time having passed.
You say that you follow a professional path that is not traditional. What does that mean? What is the traditional professional path in your definition?
Yeah, traditional from the standpoint of what I'm referring to is the type of company you might go work for. I'm a middle child. I have 2 brothers. My father, they're all working for large, major Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, right? Big businesses, global multinational organizations, private sector. So when I think about what the expectation was, and I think it's a pretty common thing that people my age were taught growing up is you go to school, you get your degree, you go work at a big company, they pay for you to get your MBA, and then you reside there for the rest of your life. You make a good living, you raise a family, all that kind of stuff. So untraditional for me was going to a company that didn't have that kind of major infrastructure. It was going to a line of work that served the nonprofit sector, which is a very misunderstood, I think, sector of the marketplace. So I guess that's what I'm referring to is it wasn't necessarily the safe pathway to take. There was arguably perceived risk in my decision to go this less traditional route. Now we operate like a traditional business, right? Like anybody would. So I would say from that standpoint, I'm not in an uncommon line of work, but being the size company and type of company we are, there's just differences in how we have to operate to thrive out there. And I do kind of like that, right? There's no room for complacency. And I really do enjoy that aspect of where we are. You know, we've got to fight for everything we get and we exist on our reputation. So there's always this good pressure to perform and do your best and leave the best impression and leave the client in a better place than where you found them kind of a mentality. And I like that a lot.
Hmm. Well, welcome to associations and mission. The other thing you mentioned is people keep saying that you are a natural leader. Unpack that for me. So imagine if you were in their shoes. What is it about you that you think attracted the leadership appointment to you?
Ooh, that's a tough question because I still don't know, to be honest with you. If I had to make some assumptions of what other people may see in me, I think I'm not afraid to speak my mind. I arguably sometimes probably talk before I think, and that can be a blessing and a curse. I'm kind of a very type A person. I'm confident in myself. And I think people want that from a leader, right? People like to be given the guidance of what to do. And someone who's doing that with great confidence, I think, is easier to follow. So I believe that that is a large aspect of what people maybe have seen in me as a leader is I'm not afraid to just kind of go and do. Go back to the junior consulting experience. We would have weekly team meetings, and there was a professor that would kind of oversee everything. It's not like they just let, 6 students run loose, but every week we were supposed to rotate who led the meeting. And this is probably impatience more than anything, but I found myself taking over each meeting or starting it because it would be such a slow start of the person who was maybe going to be leading it for that day just either wasn't prepared or wasn't confident enough to speak up in the small group. So I just kind of found myself taking the reins a lot. And actually, the professor that talked to me once was saying, I like that you do that. We need that. But also, you have to let everybody have their chance first. So it was kind of a good thing and a bad thing, that willingness to just grab hold and take control. And that probably is kind of an aspect of it. I also believe that, how I found myself in my current position is I've always had a desire to do the best possible work. I've always had a desire to help the other people around me. I've always had a desire to deepen my understanding and knowledge of what we're doing, who we're helping, all that kind of stuff. And I think that that really did stick out as I was always willing to kind of go over and above the status quo, and not for any other reason than I enjoy that. And I think that kind of led me down this current path. But, for the listeners, we'll say, I wake up, it's still intimidating each day. So that doesn't necessarily subside because the problems will continue to come, the opportunities will continue to come. And arguably the stress of the weight of that can continue to build depending on where you are, the size of your team, and all those things. So the idea that people rely on you opposed to just kind of being a cog in the system, I wake up every morning intimidated a little bit about the day.
The idea of people relying on you, that's a lot of pressure to carry on your shoulder. Do you feel that pressure at all?
So everybody has good days and bad days, right? And on those bad days, the weight of that reliance can feel very heavy. On the days where you feel like you're on point, things are clicking, maybe you just had a win, that's when it's fun and you feel like you can do anything. And you are reminded about why you do what you do and why you put yourself in that position. But I think, yes, there's a lot of times where you got to take a look in the mirror and even me and say, am I right for this? Is this a fit? Am I doing a good enough job? And that's the kind of relentless battle. And they say it's lonely at the top. And I don't say that to say, I'm at the top, but there's fewer people you can sometimes go to really express those concerns, to get the nurturing you might need in that moment. Because one, you can't show weakness to people who are looking at you as a leader. And other people might not understand your problems if they're not in a similar position. So that aspect of things can also be challenging to wrestle with. And that's where the association communities helped me a lot, is there's a lot of other people that I've met along this journey that I feel I can talk to and be open with, that they've fought similar battles, and that helps. But there's still a little bit of uniqueness to where I am, and that's where it gets challenging too. Sometimes you're having conversations with yourself, and there's not always an answer there when you do that.
You mentioned there were some bad days. Are you comfortable sharing one of those bad days with us? How do you navigate entering a bad day and what motivated you to get out of that bad day?
Yeah, ooh, a bad day can look a lot of different ways, right? And I guess one's definition of bad may vary. There's a lot of factors that I think can make a good day bad. Something that I've struggled with a lot in my life is I'm very hard on myself. The idea that you are your own worst critic is very true. And I feel that sometimes I have a it's never good enough kind of an attitude, which can be a blessing because it pushes you to want to do better, but it can be a curse because always you're going to agonize over everything. So a bad day might be thinking that we didn't do the best we could on something, as an example, or I didn't do my best job. I didn't show up in my best way, and that eats away at me. And that can affect my mood. And your mood's everything. You're a leader, I think, because people can tell if you're feeling good or not feeling good. And that's act the way they interact with you, the way that they might follow you, or the way that they might try to stay away from you. Right. But another example in a more, I guess, practical application, losing a person from our team. There's a lot of reasons why someone may move on. It's just time. They maybe aren't succeeding as much as they would like to, or an array of different reasons. But that's always a tough thing for me to deal with because people are everything for what we do. And we're a service-based business. So that can create a bad day, even if it's for a good reason, right? Someone may move on for an opportunity that's truly better for them. And I'm happy for them. But then I get back to the office and it's like, okay, well, we have to plan now what we do as a result of that. There's an impact that creates kind of a ripple effect across the company. Or maybe we didn't get that new client that we were certain that was going to fall our way for reasons that are outside of our control. Right. So those are factors that I think can create less than desirable days. But I think personally, some of that is maybe self-imposed. That whole I'm criticizing myself when instead I need to be focused on moving forward and moving past things, right? You can't dwell on everything for that long. There's just not enough hours in the day.
And what motivated you to keep moving forward?
A sense of wanting to show that I can do it, having that confidence that I can weather the storm, or I can get through this, or if I step back and take the time to really think about it, I can dissect and solve a problem. So maybe that's a little bit of arrogance, if you will, or confidence that you can fight through and get through things. Well, I think it goes back to also the reliance. When you're in a position to be a leader, if you will, it's still weird for me to say that, but I feel that there's a lot of people that are relying on me to do things so that they can go home and feed their families and buy gifts around the holidays and be happy. And it's a good pressure to have because it makes your purpose bigger than yourself. And when you realize that it's not just about me, it's not just about my feelings and emotions right now, there's dozens of other people that need to be factored into this. And that's what keeps you going through the bad days is you've got to show up the next day for them more so than for yourself. And when you keep that into perspective, it can be extremely motivating. It can be extremely terrifying at the same time. I've worked with numerous people in our firm for my entire time here. These are relationships that span far beyond the walls of our office. And I think about what the impact of me giving up or not continuing to try my hardest for them would mean. I know their children, I've been to their weddings, all that kind of stuff. And you start to think about the bigger picture of it. And that honestly, it keeps you in the game.
That's really nice. I really admire the sense that you are really genuinely care about the team that you're working with. Hearing that they are the motivations for you to keep going, that sounds really, really nice. I appreciate that.
I mean, we're in an era right now where the employee-employer relationship has never been more strained. I feel like it's a very adversarial set right now on both sides, to be frank. And if the employee-employer relationship is purely transactional, you're going to lose many of the people that maybe think the way I'm describing it, because you maybe don't care as much about the bigger picture that you're working toward. And I do appreciate that about the nonprofit sector is you're working toward a mission, you're working toward serving a greater good in whatever capacity. And I like that mindset. Well, yes, we all need to get paid to do our job. That's why it's work and that's why we do it. I don't know that everybody would do it for free. So there that has to be an element of it. But when there's something more that you're striving for, I think that can help keep people kind of anchored in what they're doing in a good way. But also, if you don't care about more than just the job and the paycheck, I think then all the things I just talked about probably don't exist. And that becomes a very dangerous environment because people will come and go with a transactional mindset. And what are you really building? Our firm's approaching its 20th year anniversary.
Well,
And I think to have people that are part of this company that have been here for 18 of the 20 years, right? 20 of the 20 years, I think it speaks volumes about why there's that additional motivation to continue to push and drive and evolve and succeed. So that worries me a bit that you see some of the narrative, especially in the news and stuff about the employee-employer relationship, because I think that that's the wrong direction to move. You want to create passion and enjoyment and a connection for people that want to do something together working towards a common goal. And I'd hate to see that get lost.
congratulations. 20 years anniversary upcoming, is it?
20 years, gosh,
Congratulations.
thank you.
The other thing I hear from that is the emotional intelligence that you invested in the way that you cultivate a relationship with your team. You are absolutely right. A lot of the employment retainers strategy these days really focusing on the connections in the sense of belonging, and that's where you can create that sense of loyalty to the organizations. And we also see that is absolutely important for Gen Z who are entering the workforce these days. So in a way, you are also future proofing the talent for your organization, and that's really cool. Go back to your stories. What is the one thing you love the most about yourself in that journey?
Honestly, I like that I am very self-reflective. So some people might say, right, your brain starts really moving when it hits the pillow at night and it makes it tough to sleep. I actually have a love-hate relationship with that because I love the fact that I'm able to objectively look at my day and how I went about things and the way I did things and be honest with myself about what I want to do differently. Did I think it was good? What's the area for improvement? Because that's helped me, I think, continue to grow and be more mindful and be more thoughtful in the way that I'm kind of operating. So I don't know if there's a specific moment or anything like that. I just am wired to want to do better, to get better, to grow and learn from my mistakes and my successes. And I think the relentless desire to want to continue to improve is something that I feel like I appreciate about myself because it's helped me, maybe not in the moment, right? Accept my faults or say sorry or things like that. But after taking the time to really reflect and decompress and consider everything, it allows you to start the next day, I think, with that in mind and to address your shortcomings or your strengths the next day with additional perspective. So I think the ability to be open and honest with yourself is something that's important. It's something that I take pride in doing. I'm very self aware in many respects, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all the above. And that's really helped me, I think, continue to grow and develop as a person and as a professional.
Yeah, self reflection is a very, very valuable practice. Was there any epiphany moments that you identified during one of those reflections?
Yeah, well, something that it's cliche, but it really resonates with me is not everybody is like you, right? So not everybody's wired the same way I'm wired. Not everybody wants the same things on a life that I do. Everybody's priorities aren't the same as my priorities. And that as a younger professional early on was really tough to understand because I was kind of raised that way. My father grew up on a farm out in Western Illinois. Both my dad and my mom put themselves through college. They worked their asses off to get to where they got. And they instilled that kind of work ethic into me and my brothers. And so we've always had this kind of hard work first mentality. And to me, as I started to advance my career and I started to want to take opportunities and as other people started to get to different places in their lives, whether that was starting families, getting married, moving by how, whatever it was, their priorities were kind of shifting away from the work and more toward the family. And I never really understood it. Don't get me wrong, I want to start and grow a family, etc. I got a wonderful girlfriend, But to me, work was, especially as I was ascending through my career, that's your number one priority. How can it not be? And it took a long time for me to recognize that what I think isn't what everybody else thinks. People don't all want to get to the same place in their career, right? Your definition or the destination that you consider success might look differently, and your skills might be different than someone else's skills. So it took a lot of other people kind of reminding me that, to then see that it's made its way into those kind of points of self-reflection, is that's always a consideration now. Is if maybe I'm frustrated by a situation and I'm reflecting on it and I'm thinking about it, I'm putting the person first more so than the activity or the moment. And I'm trying to understand it from a more empathetic perspective. But that's allowed me to really, I think, get to resolution when I'm doing the self-reflection more quickly versus just being like, I can't understand why. You're you and they're them. So that's been very, very helpful to me.
That's a really, really cool lesson, especially if you identified it yourself in your reflections. Let's move to the keyword conversation. Can you share with us your keyword today?
So my keyword is pride. And I'll be honest, I wrestled with pride or proud or a way to put it forth. And I guess what I mean when I say pride, there was a moment early on in my career that I was walking with mentor, we'll call him, and he made this comment, something about, I can always walk with my head held high, knowing that I've done a good job or I've worked hard or I've approached things in the right way. And that was kind of an epiphany for me, taking pride in everything you do, because I envisioned myself decades down the road being able to say the same thing to someone. And it kind of goes to the whole control what you can control kind of a thing. And I always strive to do my best, especially with the things that I can control. And I think about it like, at the end of the day, am I going to be proud of how I spent my time that day? And then years from now, am I going to be proud about the things I did, potentially the legacy I left, things like that? And I think that's very important. And it's the personal golden rule to me. If you can look back and say that I honestly did what was right and I did things the right way and I worked my hardest at doing it, I can always look back no matter what the outcome was and be proud of that. And whether the task is something big or small each day, that's kind of how I look at it. And that's kind of adds to the motivator, is it's not about the moment right now. Part of it is, but when I look back, did I make the right decision there? Did I make a good choice? And all of those things. So I think it's a little bit more retrospective long term, but that's kind of my beacon, is be proud of what you're doing. Take a lot of pride in the things you do personally, the things you do professionally. And when you look back later in life, you'll be okay, no matter what the outcome was.
When you email me saying that you want to talk about pride, I instantly visualize this sort of process. So just hear me out. Pride is an emotion, right? It happens after you see something that you've done that come to fruition. So after outcome has been realized. To get to that phase, you have to do stuff in between, a lot of actions and, like you say, decisions. So I want to reverse engineer that process to pride. What sort of inputs do you put in? What sort of actions do you put in to make sure that at the end of the day, you have that sense of pride?
I think it's discipline and consistency, right? So I'll think about it through not work terms, something that probably a lot of people relate to. So we're getting close to the summer, right?
Sure.
So when I think about kind of reverse engineering my health and fitness plan, am I going to be proud of the way I look in a bathing suit in a couple of months, right? And I think the motivation to kind of have the foresight to envision what your desired outcome is, and based on what you would be proud of you or other people seeing, how are you then going to take or develop the plan of attack to get there? How are you going to show up every day and do the thing that may be tough to do, but you know it's right to do because you're working towards this kind of longer term objective of, I want to be proud in that moment. So I think it's just, am I going to be proud of this at the end of the day? And it can be difficult, especially going back to professional. That's where you agonize over all the details that maybe you don't need to agonize over. But that thought process is always there in the midst of it, is on the other side of this work product, am I going to be able to stand in front of the client and be proud of what we produced for them, right? So I think for me, it is a mindset more so than a physical or even a process thing, but it's thought about all throughout the time frame. And I think that's what drives at least me to be consistent and be disciplined. Is there some slippage there, here and there? Of course, right? But it always goes back to, I think, am I going to be proud, and how proud am I going to be about this?
Is there a good case studies or success stories that you can share with us within that realm?
A lot of them, without picking any one organization. But over the last couple of years, we've had good success in blowing the fundraising targets out of the water for the organizations that we've worked with. Major fundraising efforts. For example, International Surgical Society wanted to start a foundation and wanted to raise the seed funding that would be necessary for it to continue to give out research fellowships and grants, etc. And we did a very comprehensive feasibility study for them and determined that we could help them start the foundation. And we thought that we could help them generate a minimum of $4 million in support to get them off and running. And they really appreciated the strategy. They felt like that was the right direction for them to go. The idea of being able to generate $4 million is really intriguing to them. And they said, but we can't do it. We would like your help. And then we went on to help do that and brought in almost $7 million. So to me, we were conservative to give them recommendations on what they could raise, because if we weren't there to help them, they might not be able to get to the far end of the spectrum of the dollars and their potential, because they had some bandwidth limitations, expertise limitations, etc. But when they brought us on board, we were able to help them break through that kind of minimum barrier because we brought that extra support to them and expertise. So, and to walk away from that with a board of directors and executive staff team that felt like, I can't believe we just did that. If you would have told me this a year ago when we started, that we would have almost $7 million in support committed to our organization, I'd tell you, you're crazy. And to me, that's the thing that really I love, doing something that people did not think was possible. And we get that reaction no matter if we've run a campaign that helps an organization bring in a $2 million or $10 million. The response is typically the same. We didn't know we were capable of doing that. I would hope that almost every client engagement that we've had is a case study in effective planning, strategy, and execution. The first time I got to experience that was my first fundraising campaign I ever ran for an organization. They had a lot of leadership issues occurring. Within the first 6 months, they had 3 different CEOs.
Wow.
And there was one particular board member that just wanted to call it quits on the fundraising. Called me. I was very young at the time too. This was over a decade ago. And basically was trying to convince me to throw the towel in. And I didn't have the experience. I consulted with our owner and I understood that we were committed to staying the course and we believed that we could still be successful. And I was totally bought into that. And I continued to tell him that. Fast forward, I think it was a 16 or 18-month timeline. At the end of it, I happened to find myself on a shuttle bus with him. Their annual meeting was in Las Vegas that year. And I was heading from the Wynn to the convention center or vice versa. And we happened to sit next to each other. The guy that called me, the board member that wanted to throw in the towel, relentlessly tried to persuade me for us to pull the plug. And he sat next to me, and I'll never forget, he turned to me and goes, well, you did what you said you would do. I'm impressed. And at that point, I can confidently say I was 100% bought into what I was doing. And I realized that what I would like to do in my career is continue to replicate that for both sides, continue to show people that they're capable, their organization is capable of doing more than what they thought they could do with the right expertise and support and direction. And that I could walk away from all these situations feeling like we left an organization in a better place than we found them, and we helped them do something that they never thought was possible. And there's just something unique about that. And I love it. I absolutely love that feeling.
Congratulations. I want to unpack this a little bit more. What is it about you or the approach that you use with these organizations that help you to deliver what's seemingly impossible, even for your client to start with?
Our firm was founded by an individual that has over 30 years of experience in philanthropy. They had roots from a more traditional global philanthropy kind of fundraising firm. So over that period of time, you learn there's a right way and an effective way to raise money. There just is. There's a process, there's best practices, like any kind of profession or specialty that you adhere to give you the greatest chance of success. And we have done a very good job at taking the traditional approach to philanthropy and that process and those best practices and augmenting them to be a fit within the association community. And even association foundations, they're the same on paper as any other kind of a nonprofit or charitable entity in so many ways, but people perceive them differently, right? When people are making decisions to make donations and things like that at the end of the year, they're typically looking at their hobbies, they're looking within their community, they're looking at their higher education institutions, hospitals, etc. I don't think that they're thinking, hey, how can I give additional funding to my professional association, right? So the approach is just different, but there's a lot of similarities. And I think being able to adapt what has been effective for many, many different kinds of charitable organizations and nonprofits to be very focused for the association world has allowed us to be as successful as we have been. I also believe that we seek to bring people on our team that are able to understand where an association is trying to go and be able to help package and communicate that in a way that it is going to be very appealing to people who are starting to look at their association as a way to reinvest in their industries. And that combination of both, I think, our personnel and we try to find the right people for the role, coupled with a deep, deep knowledge of the ins and outs of fundraising and best practices and augmenting that again to the association space has allowed us to see the success that we have. And we're very proud of that.
Nice. I'm hearing expertise and experience, the talents that you have. I'm also hearing some sort of a relationship building when you are joining on board with your client.
Absolutely. It's funny because when most people think of consultants, there's a preconceived notion of what they're going to be like, right? Ultimately, somebody out there, whether it's a board member or staff member, has had a not so great experience with a consultant. And we've all seen the movie Office Space, and you've got the two Bobs. There's maybe not great assumptions made. So I think, yes, one, to be able to walk into the doors of an association we haven't worked with and help them see that we're different. At least we believe ourselves to be different and unique from the standpoint of our passion for what we do and how we operate as a consulting firm, coupled with the ability to care. I think a lot of things that make our team members successful is while these organizations become clients, I feel like we get so immersed in them, in their missions, in their members, in their leadership, that it's as if we're working for them at the same time as working with them. We have a vested interest in seeing them succeed. We believe in the missions that they have. We believe in why they're raising the funds. And that enables our team to be even more effective when you're thinking about coaching and supporting volunteer leadership through the fundraising process, because we want the same outcome that they want. And our motivation isn't purely from a business perspective. Is it good for business to be successful with our clients? Absolutely. But I think our team, and what I love about all the members of the team, is that there's this desire to see the organization succeed and to see the people that we're working with succeed. And I think that relational aspect of it, as you've pointed out, is a huge difference maker, right?
Mm.
Our clients aren't just a number, they aren't just a paycheck. And then my role within the association forum, I go and I serve alongside them. So there's another element to the relationship that exceeds even the contracts that we may have with them, is these are our peers too. And I like to be able to help my friends in the industry, as I consider them, advance their organizations and their missions. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. And sometimes it's sad when a relationship culminates. If we've done a good job and they don't need anything else because we've been successful, it's tough to let that go sometimes because it becomes part of your day. It becomes part of your sphere, your network. And it's kind of like when a good TV series ends, you watch the final episode, you're like, what am I going to do now? How am I going to spend my time? Right. I've been following these characters for so long. And I think there's some similarities in what we do, but we do have a genuine interest in the success of the groups that we work with. And I think that does help us in a big way deliver the best service possible.
That's really nice. And again, I'm hearing that sense of genuinely care for the people that you are working with and for the client you are serving. I really appreciate that. Now, let's move to the helicopter view for the last questions of the episode. Looking at your entire story, both professional and personal context, what's your proudest achievement up to this point?
That's a really great question. And it's really, really difficult to narrow anything down to a single achievement. I'll respond with this. I think getting to where I am to kind of go back to where our conversation started is I took a chance by getting into this business and this industry and this company specifically. And to have made it to where I am for how long I've been here is something I'm very, very proud about. And when you look at other people in my age and experience level, it is not so common to be at one place for this long. It's just not. And I'm proud because I feel like that means I have committed to something that's bigger than just myself. I've stayed because things motivate me beyond just personal individual gain, right? There's always going to be ups and downs in one's career, especially if you stay at one organization for a long time and change occurs and things like that. But to still be here today, to still have kind of this desire to push things forward and make it the best it can be, I'm very proud to have weathered some of the downturns and seized opportunities when times were good. And I'm very proud that when I made the transition to the role I'm in and the people who I was working next to as I kind of ascended that position, that they're still here too, which tells me I've got to be doing something right, at the least, because they haven't ran for the hills. But the entire timeline, when you think about it, it's kind of crazy to think that it's been so long and there's so much that's happened in that time frame. So sorry to not answer your question as directly, but I can't pinpoint one thing. There's a lot of things I'm proud of, but I think just being here today, through everything that I've experienced and endured, I think it's awesome to still be here. And hey, maybe it'll be my only job ever, forever.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Before we close the episode, is there any last story that you'd like to share about pride or any closing remark?
I just think it's important to put into perspective what makes you proud of what you do. And I think you should consider that when you approach anything. I'm a high school lacrosse volunteer coach. So there's a high school down the road where I went to high school. I've been a coach there for now as long as I've worked here. So about 14 years. And I think about it like this. I watch the kids grow and I see them come back after they graduate. And there's always a part of me of what lessons, what impressions did I instill in the next generation, really? They're all such great kids and they're so malleable at that age, to be honest. And I show up and I kind of consider myself, I'm less of a coach, I'm more of a big brother for the team. And to kind of connect this back to pride, I'm always so proud to see that if I've made even a little impact on any one of their lives, I can walk away being like, okay, I had an effect on this person and they may take that into consideration for the rest of their lives, or that may have influenced a decision or a choice they make, right? And the message I always have to them is be nice, be kind, be a good person, and stay out of trouble, make good decisions. And it's funny when they come back because I think that's arguably one of the things I'm most proud of is to know that I've impacted someone on a personal level and at an age where they still have the whole rest of their lives to live. And if there's something that they think about that I said or told them or helped them with years down the road, that would be a pretty significant accomplishment for me personally. So treat everything like that, right? Whether it's professional or personal, will you look back later in time and be happy that you did what you did? And for the times that you're not, did you learn from that and get better?
It is the perfect way to wrap up the episode. Thank you again for your time and sharing your story with us.
My name is Tyler Eble, and you are listening to Humans of Authenticity, the CEO Special Edition.